The West has a supply chain problem, but it's also facing a power problem. What looks like a technical minerals fire is really a geopolitical alarm. China has turned, its critical minerals into leverage for real. And the G7, well, the G7 cannot catch up. And of course, it's not just about rare earths, lithium or nickel. It's about whether the West can still control the very material base of its own industrial and military power. So yeah, I am here in Northern Europe, walking in the streets this night in geopolitics, walking with me to tell you about these very important happenings in the world. So many things that happened in G7. And it's incredible how the bloc becomes weaker and weaker by the year. And of course, the G7 response to China's critical mineral strategy is not simply industrial policy, or as Jake Sullivan has said before, strategic dependence, de-risking. That's the new name in the industrial policy and industrial sector in the United States and Europe, de-risking. And by de-risking, they mean minimize the dependency they have of China in so many important materials besides rare earths, of course. Well, it's a defensive attempt to slow a broader shift in global power where China uses control over processing and export restrictions to shape the strategic room available to the West. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but 2 weeks ago, China initiated a series of export control restrictions to very important United States military industrial companies, and also has prohibited Chinese state companies to buy anything, definitely anything, from these major military industrial companies. These major industrial companies of the West, which are obviously the biggest military compound of the world. And this only points out how it's extremely important to pay attention on what is happening, because the signs are coming from everywhere. China is decided to manifest, not the destiny manifest of the United States, to manifest to be the biggest nation, the biggest GDP, the biggest power of construction. And when you look at the West, right, Europe has not even a chance, right? I mean, the China continent, the China country, which we could call a continent, is bigger than the whole Europe. I mean, China has more people inside of it than the whole continent of Europe. So the competition here with Europe does not exist. With the United States, however, it's different. And of course, the European leaders are feeling that. And one of the points I want to share with you about the so important happenings in G7 is that, in other words, the minerals are the surface story, and the deeper story is actually the redistribution of leverage between an ascendant, non-white superpower and the West trying and fighting and struggling to preserve its position. So the G7 agreed to reduce reliance on any single rare earth supplier to 60% by 2030, with a longer-term target of 50%. I mean, does it even sound realistic? The plan starts with lithium and nickel, which are one of the most important compounds of batteries, right? And without batteries, it comes much, much, much harder, if not impossible, for you to create the EVs and the decarbonization target that you have. Leaders also discussed stockpiling coordination and harmonized mechanisms to respond to these supply disruptions. France, as always, pushed the agenda because it wants to rebuild domestic and European capacity in rare earths-related supply chains, because Macron is apparently one of the few European leaders that have realized that they weren't, and they never will be America's priority. I mean, United States, either with industrial policy of Joe Biden or with the completely despise, the contempt Trump has for Europe and for European leaders, it's very clear for Macron now that they need to build a stronger Europe without the United States, of course. That's very important to consider. France also pushed the agenda because it wants to produce enough rare earths, oxides, by 2030 to meet 100% of Europeans' heavy rare earth demand and about 25% of light rare earth demand. They want to cover about 10% of Europe's alloy needs and expands. But China export restriction on rare earth-related items have already affected supply chains in Japan, in Europe. I mean, the automotive industry has already gone to the White House so many times to tell Trump, please don't do this. Please, if they stop exporting these minerals to us, all our production will stop. I mean, they have so much to lose. And of course, the Western response is not preventive. The Western response is not preventive. Bom, corta aqui os últimos 30 segundos. The West's response is not preventive. It's a reaction to an established vulnerability. Well, what it means a lot. It means the West is broken. I mean, if they can't barely agree on simple things, on international law, how can they could possibly join forces to diminish their dependence from China, to create the very industrial base that gave France and the European countries back there in the middle of 20th century, after the Second World War, the leverage that created and expanded the economy so much. Well, G7 here is a big problem. And what we need to consider by it is that the war has started. And the wars no longer need to be fire with fire, guns with guns. The war is everywhere. The war is in export controls. The war is in the minerals. The war is who has more data center. The war is in who has less petrol, who has less dependency on petrol, who can decarbonize, who can diminish its energy dependence on any other country. It's not only about who has more guns, who has more base industry. The game has changed. It's shifting. And all the wind is now pointing towards Asia. Asia, as it was 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And that's extremely important to point out. So that's one more geopolitics working with me here in the streets of the Netherlands, that I came only to speak with you and to show a little bit of how complex, even more, the world is getting. How complex the world is becoming, more than we can possibly imagine. And if you want to know more the relations between China, rare earths, the West, and what is left of the West, please subscribe and support us, because this century, it's only beginning.